So, morning, everybody, or afternoon, should I say. I am having a chat this afternoon with Debbie Wheeler, who is the CEO of the Island Learning Trust, and Ryan Driver, who is the Deputy CEO of the same trust, and they are Minster Primary School, Halfway Houses Primary School, and Sunnybank Primary School. And Debbie, you've been teaching for 29 years, and a head teacher for 20 years. So thank you very much for your time and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to speak to you about as your head teachers, and I have a very charmed existence where I get to go into schools, work with children, avoid as many adults as possible, and then come back out again, which suits my level of intellect and my mental age. But what's very interesting for me, and from some of the reports Debbie and I had a little exchange in the week, is the challenges you guys are facing as head teachers and executive head teachers in managing this whole situation, particularly in your schools are primary schools, so you are dealing with the younger ones. What have been the biggest challenges so far for you?
I think probably the biggest challenges are receiving information from the government at the same time as the public do. And then we're needing to make speedy responses to ensure that our schools remain safe and well organised for our youngest pupils, really, and providing parents with clarity about expectations and what we can and can't provide, and the same again for staff. So operating really with a bit of a time lag with the public receiving information about school opening, school closure at the same time as we do. And so we feel that we're on a treadmill playing catch up. And there's always a lag. For instance, last night's announcement talked about schools reopening for 3-year groups, with more details following today. I think those details were probably released about half an hour ago. But last night, our parents would have been feeling quite vulnerable about school return.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm on social media a lot as part of my own work, and the anxiety is quite clear to see from parents and the families that I work with. Actually, it's that lack of information all the way along, and I appreciate we are in unprecedented times, and having some of that information is very, very difficult. But I think we have seen quite a few announcements now where there's been sweeping statements made about schools, and then the schools I know that schools haven't had that information. And are you guys then inundated with phone calls from families and parents and messages, or is it more staff?
No, I don't think we are, because we've been sending out regular updates, being very honest, true, transparent, making sure that our parents have the information that we have, because we get it at the same time, but with our slight take on it. And I think just from last night, seeing the reactions from our parents to Debbie's update, I think the anxiety actually came out. The few, okay, we don't need to worry about June the 1st at the moment. And I don't think we were, completely aware of that level of anxiety. We knew there would be some, but I think it really came out in those parents' reactions last night to Debbie's update.
So that's given you more information about your parents and your families through your openness and honesty. And it's, I have that real joy of focusing on the human element, and I get to do that for my job. Sometimes being professional and being human can oppose each other, and it can be very, very difficult to get that balance just right. And for people that don't know, you put out a fantastic letter.
I think the last couple of weeks particularly, that I think it was a novelty for the first few weeks, and the updates were really good, but I think the parents have really now started feeling it.
Yeah.
They're having trouble getting their children to do phonics and their reading and their maths and their curriculum. They're really struggling with it. So I know a message from Debbie last week was, don't beat yourself over it.
Yeah.
I think we are in unprecedented times. We're very aware as a trust, as school leaders, that our parents are facing significant unknown situation at the minute. Lots of them will have issues with a job, whether they've got financial difficulties, they may have elderly parents, they've got shielding going on, and actually the safety and well-being of their child should be something that they're not considering. You know, their children are best off at home with them, safe and secure, ideally doing a bit of school learning, if and when it can be managed. We absolutely don't want to add a burden to our families at a really challenging time already for them. And so we try to be fairly proactive in sharing the messages, and also sharing how we feel. You know, I'm a parent, I've got 3 children, one who doesn't get up until 12 o'clock at midday and is doing home learning, but not a great deal. Another one who's up at 8 doing home learning, is obsessed with it. We are human, and we want to support our families to recognise that we don't expect the world from them. Their core job is keeping their children safe and well. On the return to school, actually we can pick children up where they are once we've started to work with them in terms of well-being and an understanding of the time and difficulties that they've experienced and faced. You know, actually learning is secondary.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I had a year 5 in one of my sessions this morning, and she was getting herself in a tizzy because she didn't think that the year 6s need to go back, because she thought she as a year 5 needed to go back because they'll have missed their SAT, so she's got hers next year. And she's a very bright little girl, she wants to learn, and she's doing all her home learning. So the conversation actually has been to try and distract her a little bit away from what learning is. Is it education learning, or is it life learning? You know, so she's gone off to make some cakes and try and get a little bit of a balance right, so that she wasn't so anxious. And of course her dad's gone to work today for the first time, so that has now become an unsettled environment in where who's looking after who now, where people have been at home and she's not at school. What's your opinion on how some of the media have portrayed these situations with school? Because there's been a really mixed response. There's some quite guarded, articles, but I mean the one we were looking at this week about the pressures that head teachers have faced. There's been some very interesting articles in the media about what schools are and aren't doing, whether they're open or closed. What's your opinion on those?
I think the media have a role to fulfill for responsible journalism, and actually during this very disruptive and disrupted period they haven't done that well. From almost the moment that the decision was taken that schools would close, there began to be this whipping up and frenzy about when would we open, how much education are our children missing, and that's created anxiety within our school communities for the children, the parents, for staff, and also for heads managing that. Actually, in the time of national crisis, schools being open in the bigger picture isn't the be all and end all. Actually having children and families and communities feeling safe and supported and well, eating and sleeping, having their physiological needs met, feeling safe, secure, is more important. And I think lots of schools and school leaders will have felt intense pressure. I was constantly on social media. Several online newspapers would constantly be putting out schools to reopen on the 1st of June, schools to be doing this by X, Y or Z. And actually they were on the same days that the GFE had definitively said there were no current plans to open schools. And the impact of that on school communities is horrendous. Anxiety raising at a time when actually we all need to be calm and in the moment and dealing with what we know, not what might happen.
No, and that's from my perspective. I mean, my passion is sort of neuropsychoeducation programs for children, and that trying to get that understanding, that message across, that currently we are all in such a responsive state. You know, we have 80+ billion neurons each they all fire in up to 1 trillion different ways each, and at 7.8 billion people on the planet, that does mean that we're just not going to respond in the same way as anybody else, and that's okay. So there's an awful lot of judgment about how people are responding, when actually we're all in this situation of being very human and coping in the best way we can within our own sort of system and our own little environment, and that's different for so many people. So someone I like who works in the state, a guy called Michael McKnight, he talks about schools as living systems, and his ethos is that, and I believe this completely, we're having worked in lots of different schools, is this standardization of how schools approach things. When every school comes from a different demographic, they have a different environment, they have a different social construct, and that can be very, very difficult to have a one size fits all approach, because one school is not the same as another school. Is there much leeway in these guidance notes for schools to take the lead on how they're going to do things, or is it sort of a set hard and fast instruction, or is that not clear yet?
I think there is a paragraph that was in a report last night that did say that if head teachers felt that schools were not safe and they didn't have the staff to manage,
Yeah.
they would be allowed to make that decision. But actually, maybe it should have been the government making that decision and not putting it all onto us. And actually, we all know what's coming. The parks are opening.
Yeah.
Unlimited daily exercise.
Yeah.
A spike will come in a couple of weeks' time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because more cases means more deaths.
Yeah.
And and I think we're all going to be living with that, and the anxiety as a community and as a country we're going to feel, knowing we hear today that the London Underground was rammed.
I've seen that this evening.
I mean, did they expect anything different?
I think, Mandy, the key here is that the broad overarching guidelines have to be given from the government. That's our operating framework. But within each of our individual school circumstances, the number of children we've got who would want to be in school, whose parents want them to be in school because they think it's the safest place for them to be, the number of staff that we have who are available for work, taking out those who are shielding, those with significant health concerns themselves, those things have got to come into play. We will not open unless it's safe for us to do so. And with the current level of social distancing, the 2-metre rule, with our 7x8 classrooms on average, we're talking about being able to accommodate one class of children across 4 classroom spaces. So for 3-year groups, you're talking about our 3 formentary schools needing 36 classrooms, which we don't have. We have 21. We are also looking at parents have got to be comfortable with where we're going with this. So whilst the government is issuing a mandate that we may open on the 1st of June, it will be clearly unravel or not as the roadmap unfolds.
Yeah.
We may actually be switching destination along the route, but between now and then we will be busy planning for that influx. But parents have got to feel confident that their children can be safely managed, and until that tighter guidance that must come from the government about the ratios, about maintaining social distancing, the level of chemicals that are going to be needed for a deep clean of the classrooms, until those things are clear, we can't give absolute clarity about safety, which is why parents have got to be in the driving seat.
Yeah, and it's the little things like that, you see. So talking to you guys, from my perspective, I wouldn't even have thought about the fact that chemicals will have to be used, and these are small children, and actually, so that from a health and safety point of view, that's something that I wouldn't even have considered. So it's really good to have little examples like that, because that's just one example, and there are many, many, many that most people at home wouldn't even think about or understand that needs to happen when you're looking at those sort of plans to make something safe for the children.
I think we're also looking at, the government have decided it will be our youngest children, our 4 and 5-year-olds, our 5 and 6 and our 11-year-olds who are coming back. Our 4 and 5s are tactile, active learners who will want to be touching you. Maintaining social distancing is very difficult for those children. They're also less able to self-regulate. If they fall over, they'll want a cuddle. They'll want to be comforted, to feel you, and to have a sensory relationship with the adults who are taking them. And actually, that's going to be very difficult to manage. Really difficult. In terms of us widening that key worker description and taking in every child from each family would have been a more holistic and sensible option. In addition, children would have their siblings coming in with them. That would have been reassuring in itself for our youngest children. We're going to have children coming in who've experienced bereavement and loss for the first time, who have seen mums and dads at home concerned about food, the rent, money, family tensions, and those children are going to need careful handling and management.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, most schools now do have those systems in place for the training to be given to staff, but probably not on the scale that we are potentially likely to see once we come back to school. And from my perspective, I think sensory issues are going to be such a big thing for the children I've worked with. Once they go back to noise and people, they are really going to struggle because they have got very comfortable being in a safe, quiet environment, and that's just too nice for them. That's exactly what they need. They don't feel comfortable in school anyway. So to get those children back in, you're going to need an excess of staff that can accommodate that themselves, and staff who feel confident in their own emotional state to be able to give that back to other children.
I think as well, Mandy, what we're going to experience is a significant number of children who previously have been quite confident young learners who've happily come into school to see their friends and have enjoyed the social aspects of school. They've had a significant period off with lots of different tensions at home, but when they return to school, if they are returning to smaller class sizes, they won't be returning to an adult that they necessarily know and know well. We're going to have a higher incidence of anxiety and attachment issues, children not wanting to be dropped off at the classroom door. And what do we want to do with those children? You want to give them a hug and reassure. We're not going to be able to do that. And that's going to be over a protracted period of time, and is going to take really careful management.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen there's some sort of good courses popping up now online for staff around attachment and change management, which I think that links into the bereavement process, and so they're nice little courses to do. But you may have a limited amount of time to get lots of staff members on that, and there's lots of operational issues around, contractual issues around getting staff to be trained and accessing training, isn't there? Because there's time frames and people's allocated hours for training. And
I think also the social distancing and your relationship with children, you may not be working with children that you've got a good relationship to start with. You're an unknown adult trying to provide comfort and guidance, which yes, you can provide. Is it going to be as effective as their old class teacher? No, it's not.
And in a secondary, they are much more used to having different staff and different teachers. So, that could potentially be better managed. But with this choice to have the really young ones, those early attachments are so vital in these early years, to have them so spread out that they've got different members of staff and different teachers. From my practice, that's concerning for me at that age, because it's such a key developmental age with those bonding experiences that that doesn't sit comfortably from that perspective.
And I think it's more than that as well, isn't it? They're used to having free flow in and out of the classroom. They're used to being able to pop into the loo, have a drink when they like, have water when they like. And to some extent, some of those flexibilities won't be there either.
No.
So the known adult won't be there. They're not going to be with their friends. They're going to be in smaller groups. The structure of the day will be different. Their ability to change direction in their learning, have ownership over their learning to some degree, will be very different. And it takes very careful management and thinking.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet with all of the answers as to what we need to put in place to make it as painless and supportive for our youngsters as it can be, or our staff.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, we're all in this sort of anxious state of you know, and I mean, if you took it right back to, you know, our very primal instincts, it's, you've got your fight and flight scenario, and where you've got people very wired up and sort of antsy about it, and you've got people that are quite happy to tuck indoors and go, oh, I'm not, you know, and it's that's our natural state, and that's where we sit. And, you know, being aware of that can be really helpful, but you know, it does have a massive impact. I had this little girl this morning, and I said to her, you know, what do you think about all of this? And she said, well, that's the thing. She said, because I'm year 5 and I'm not silly, but no one asks me what I think. And I thought that was really interesting. So a colleague of mine who runs the Phoenix Educational Consultancy, she just last week, she put a survey, Monkey survey out, and actually 2,000 children have answered it to give their views upon what they feel is going to be most supportive for them going back to school. So she releases the results of that next week. So I'll tag you guys in on the clip once that comes up, because she's done that for school leaders. So, and I'm sure you can access your own kids, but this is quite a big national thing, so that might be quite nice and helpful. But you know, I can't offer any words of wisdom because I'm not a head teacher. You know, I'm good at what I do, and you guys are amazing at what you do, and that's the joy of these collaborative conversations, is that, you know, hopefully for some people we've answered a few questions or just given a little bit more insight into the situation at the moment.
I think really the best we can do is have a considered approach, and it was important last night for us to communicate with our parents, bearing in mind the announcement from Boris that didn't really give any kind of additional detail that our parents would find reassuring. But we in our teams are cogitating, thinking, planning, and have been for a long time. We've got a return to school action plan, which is very heavily focused on well-being and supporting youngsters. But actually we need some of that detail that we should have had today in order to really get to grips with where we feel that we're going. We will communicate with our parents because they need to feel reassured about their children coming in.
I hope by the time we've sort of signed off this and you've got back to your computer, there'll be some magical piece of guidance there, which will require a bucket full of coffee to get through, and a few scratched heads. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for explaining things to me and to whoever's going to watch this in a way that's nice and easy to understand. And I wish you so much luck in trying to navigate those programs, and I hope I will see you at some point when the schools are up and running, and it'll be nice to come in and catch up with you and the children. But thank you for all the hard work you do for our families, and I wish you very good luck with all your government guidance, and I'm very, very glad that that's not my job.
Thanks, Amanda.
You know, take care. Thank you.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.